lot can happen in just 1 minute. Over the next 60 seconds, your heart will beat an average of 72 times. It'll filter out 6 liters of blood from your bloodstream. And it'll accommodate 144 million new red blood cells. For an organ about the size of your fist, the heart is an absolute powerhouse. But as with everything, the higher the complication, the higher the risk of failure. In this same minute, 2 Americans will die of cardiac-related issues. That's 2 people gone in the same amount of time it takes to calculate their heartbeats. What's astounding is that this is happening in the middle of a medical revolution. In the past few years, we found ways to implant pig hearts into human bodies. We found ways to keep hearts beating outside of the human body on their own. And we found ways to 3D print our own organs. All of these should be giving us hope, but yet they're highlighting a stark reality. Of the 105,000 people on the organ transplant waitlist last year, less than 40% got the organs they desperately needed. That's the thing about organ transplants. Demand has always outweighed supply. Yet, it remains one of the most fascinating frontiers in modern medicine. But why? It's because organ transplantation is more than just about moving organs from one body to another. It's about rescuing life from the very edge of death. It's about bringing hope to the people who need it. Organ transplantation embodies our eternal quest to overcome mortality and give the body a second chance at life. But where did this idea even come from? To answer this question, we need to go back in time, around 3,000 years. Welcome to ancient India, 800 BCE. Here, among the bustling markets and the spice trade, we see one more interesting factor: the first surgeries ever recorded in the history of mankind. These were skin grafts, and ancient Indian doctors took skin from the healthy parts of burn victims' bodies and replaced dead tissue that was found on their face. But this wasn't the only transplant occurring at this time. A few thousand miles away in ancient Egypt, we saw a similar idea. Ancient Egyptians believed that in the afterlife, the body had to be whole for the body to pass through and enjoy its time after death. So what did they do? They transplanted organs into dead bodies. And though this is spiritual rather than medical, it shows that the idea of transplantation has surpassed many millennia and many cultures. A few hundred years later, we see the same idea in ancient China. We hear stories of arm and limb transplants. And though we don't know how successful these were, we know that the idea has always been there, and that the idea has continued. Now let's fast forward to modern times. In 1906, Dr. Edward Zurm performed the first successful corneal transplant, restoring sight to a blinded laborer. This was just the beginning, though. In 1954, at Harvard Medical School, Dr. Joseph Murray performed the first successful kidney transplant between 2 identical twins, kickstarting modern medicine into the organ transplantation age. Then in 1967, Dr. Christian Bernard performed the first successful heart transplant. The 1980s brought even more advancements. With the invention of cyclosporin, the first immunosuppressive drug, it was possible to transplant organs between people of different genetic makeups. Dr. Thomas Starles took full advantage of this to perform the first successful liver transplant. From there, things have just continued to advance to our modern age. But yet, we face the same 3 issues that we have faced all of these years. First, there just aren't enough organs. Tens of thousands of people are added to the organ transplant waitlist every single year, yet the amount of donors remains tragically low. In some places, this has led to a dangerous black market where organs are bought and sold under unsafe and often unethical conditions. In some very dark and desolate places, there are even reports of what we call organ harvesting, or the murder of children for their organs. And what's even worse than this is that oftentimes these surgeries fail tragically due to illness, immune rejection, or legal consequences. This means that we're destroying 2 lives for the sake of none, something that needs to stop immediately. Second, the ethics are still very complicated. I mean, let's look at the very beginning, right? Most organ transplants are taken from what we call brain-dead patients, meaning that the brain has stopped functioning, but the organs can still function under the right conditions. But what exactly is brain death? This varies between cultures, it varies between traditions, it varies by country. And what's more is that the advancement of new technology that keeps the organs alive after the death of the brain has made it even more complicated. So what exactly is brain death? When is it okay to perform a surgery? These are questions that medicine needs to ask sooner than later. And third, organ transplantation is still extremely, extremely complicated. Let's start at the very first step, transport. How do you get an organ from one body to another? So the traditional method of putting an organ on ice buys around 4 hours. That's 4 hours to cut open the first body, remove the organs, transport it to the next hospital, prep the second body, implant the organ in, and make sure everything works perfectly right. In other words, that's not a lot of leeway. And even if everything works perfectly well, we still run the risk of immune rejection, illness, or other failures that may occur. But don't worry, science is fighting back. In 2022, researchers successfully implanted a pig's heart into a human's body. The man that received it lived for an additional 3 months. And though that may not seem like a lot of time to us, it was absolutely life-changing for him and the researchers that made this amazing feat possible. What's more is that these same researchers are using similar methods of CRISPR gene editing to make pig hearts more compatible with humans in the future, just as humans are already doing right now. And as for the question of how researchers got an organ from a farm to a hospital in less than 4 hours, well, they didn't have to. The new technology called the organ perfusion system, or heart-in-the-box technology, buys us 8 hours of time, doubling the amount of time that we can keep the heart outside of the human body. This makes it possible for researchers to complete more complicated procedures and experiment with new technologies that they had never experimented with before. But that's not the only advancement going on right now. Novartis, a pharmaceutical company, has recently come out with a drug called the Zortress pill. This pill promises to improve the effectiveness of blocking immune rejection while not weakening the immune system nearly as much, making it possible for people to live their lives after transplants. But what else is going on in the organ transplant world? Well, we've all heard of regenerative therapy. We've seen in the news many reports of stem cell therapy and similar ideas. But what if I told you that these same therapies are being used for organ transplants as well? Researchers are working on using people's cells to grow organs outside of their bodies, meaning that we can use our own cells to grow pieces of us and plant it back in the case of organ failure. This is life-changing for many people as it reduces the risk of immune rejection completely and makes it possible for us to grow our own organs in case of failure rapidly and without many risks. And then there's 3D bioprinting. And yes, you heard that right. Researchers have found ways to 3D print our own organs. And as crazy as it sounds, we've had success with functional skin, functional cartilage, and even functional mini organs. These same researchers are looking to grow this in the future and print fully functional, full-size hearts and kidneys in the coming years. That being said, though, there are still many risks that we must take into consideration. There's a long road ahead before we reach the top of the mountain. There's a lot of funding, a lot of research, a lot of FDA approval that must go into these procedures. And while this happens, we need to think, what can we do in this room here to do our part and improve the healthcare system? Well, here's our solution. We often focus too much on surgeries to save people at the very end, when we could be focusing on prevention. By making public health a public priority rather than a private priority, we can make our nation safer, healthier, and better overall. We need to focus on routine checkups, healthy diets, and routine exercise, making it possible for everybody to improve the conditions of their hearts and reduce the risk of death from cardiac failure, which is the leading cause of death in the United States. Because at the end of the day, this is not just about science. Ultimately, it's about giving the body a second chance at life. It's about bringing back hope for the families who desperately need it. Organ transplantation gives us a way to save lives and make a difference in the people who need it. So today, let's push it forward from one heart to another. Thank you.